Hi, I'm Brian Hester, and I'm the chairman of the Finance Committee for the Frederick County Public Schools School Board. I'm going to call this finance meeting to order at 4:05. There's an agenda in front of us. How would the board like to proceed?
Motion to approve the agenda, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There is no unfinished business, so we'll move on to new business, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Hummer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have a couple items that we are going to be reviewing with you all today. Of these items, two of them, we are going to be making a proposal for them to be pushed to the full board for approval. So the first is we're going to be discussing the VPSA Educational Technology Funds. That is one item that will need to go to the board for full approval. We also have the results of our internal audit. We also want to get you all up to speed of the MOU for our School Resource Officer program. We also have some staffing adjustments that we wanted to make you aware of through our transportation department, and thank you for Mr. Nance for being here to answer any questions that you all might have. And then we also have an update and an overview of our parent organizations, such as our boosters, PTOs, athletic associations. We want to provide you an update of where we are in that process, as well as providing you with an overview of those throughout Frederick County. And then we also have another proposal that we would like to go to the full board for consideration, which is adding a proclamation for a Substitute Appreciation Day, which thank you for Kristen and Katie for being here to answer any questions about that one as well. So with that, I'm now going to hand it off to Kristen Anderson. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first on our agenda is to talk to you about the VPSA Educational Technology Funds. This is a bit of housekeeping because as we embark on a new school year, the state is going to continue to provide these funds for us. And the primary purpose of those funds is to provide computer-based instruction and testing to support our standards of learning. Another goal of the program is to provide supports for high-speed internet connectivity. Part of the restriction of the grant is that it requires us to first address high schools, and then middle schools, and then elementary. Under this grant, Frederick County Schools is allocated $570,000. Of that, $26,000 goes directly to NREP, since we are fiscal agent. And then the $540,000 for Frederick County Schools, it's based on a calculation of $26,000 per site or per building, as well as $50,000 for the division as a whole. The funds that we receive from the state are typically received in April or in the spring, which since our fiscal year ends at June 30, that really condenses the window in which we have time to procure those items and receive them. Therefore, in your packet is a resolution, which we are recommending that you forward to the full board. This resolution allows for us to spend the funds now and then reimburse ourselves when that state money comes in April. And how we plan to use those funds, again, it's a grant, so there are limitations and restrictions within the use of the funds, but we plan to use it to support networking equipment as well as refreshing our Chromebooks and our laptops. And I just want to mention that the source and the use of these funds were also part of our 2024 operating budget. Any questions?
Chairman?
Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
So, Mrs. Anderson, you said that the source of these funds were referenced in the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Were they funds that we knew we would be getting reimbursed for? Or are they freeing up funds? Does that make sense?
The state has been providing this grant for at least 20 years for us, so we knew up front that their intent was to provide it again.
Okay.
So we planned for it in our budget.
Got it. And then, if we are spending those funds now through and then getting the reimbursement, I know you all know how to handle all of that, but what does that mean for budget-wise? Are there any issues with categories and things like that of where the funds will come from now? Because we'll be using them from somewhere now and getting reimbursed for them later.
There's no issue of categories or anything like that.
Mrs. Anderson, is it the same amount every year?
It has been the same
Okay.
amount every year, yes. It only changes when we add a new school.
Got it. Do you have any questions, Mrs. White?
No.
Mr. Lake, do you have any questions?
Are we assuming no local match? Ever?
There is a 20% local match,
20%?
so it's about $109,000, yes.
Okay. So you do need a motion from our board to move this resolution to the full board. Am I correct, Dr. Hummer?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. If there are no further questions, how would the board like to proceed?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we recommend to the full board approval of the resolution for the VPSA Educational Technology Funds declaring intent to reimburse itself for qualifying expenditures.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, move on to the internal audit results.
The internal audit was performed the last week of March in 2023. The performance period that it was based on is September 1st, 2022 through February 28th, 2023. The procedures for the schools can be found in the audit report that you have on pages 4, 5, and 11. The findings and recommendations are listed in front of you, but they can also be found on page 12 of the audit report. There were no findings in any of the audited areas. The internal audits have been taking place at FCPS for over 20 years, and they're performed twice a year. This is only the second time that IT has been involved in this audit for the computer inventory and the student device inventory, which consists of just under 20,000 items. They also had no findings. The no findings on the audit indicates that everything that was checked and looked at agree with the FCPS policies and regulations. Any questions about the audit?
Any board members?
Oh, no findings is a good thing.
Yes, it is.
I think I misread when I was looking through the packet ahead of time. I saw the computer inventory, but it looks like that's on the county side, not on the schools.
Oh, go ahead, Ms.
I have a
White.
question. I looked through the audit as well and found something with the county. If I remember correctly, the last audit that we had, there was a similar finding. Okay.
For us, yes, we did have some findings their first time when they got audited.
Ours were
Computer side.
corrected with a corrective action plan.
Correct, yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, it was just a handful, like out of.
12 items, I think.
Yeah.
12 or 16, it
Yeah.
wasn't a lot.
I just like to make it, I mean, I just know, Mr. Comstock and I were just talking, I just came from a school open house and my daughter was issued her Chromebook. So I know there's a lot of those things going out today and tomorrow, but, for us to have, just shy of 20,000 devices school-wide and to have no findings is remarkable. And I'd like to publicly say, I know Chad Foreman's a lot behind this, and I want to commend Chad and your team's efforts on keeping this. And as Mrs. White mentioned, there were a couple findings the first go-around. We've obviously fixed those because we have no findings this time, and it's just to be commended because all of us have, electronic devices, so that's something to be very proud of.
Yeah, I'd like to add too that when we talk about all the under 20,000 Chromebooks and computers that we have, this means that every time an employee leaves, it gets checked in. And every time a student comes in, is new or leaves, it gets checked in or checked out. So that's a lot of activity. So that's why this no findings for them is a really big deal.
Please pass along, to the team just how grateful we are for, 20,000, that's a lot, so congratulations. With that said, we can go on to the MOU for School Resource Officer SRO program.
Thank you, Mr. Hester. So as you have in front of you, you have our memo of understanding between ourselves and the Sheriff's Department. And as you know, this is something that we hold dearly and that we are proud to have those SROs in our schools, and we certainly appreciate the work that they do. The thing that I want to point out to you about this is this does not require a motion. This is out on our website by state code. It has to be out there for 10 days. We put it out today to seek public comment. So you would know that also that it's out there in case you get questions. So we held it until this meeting. And the thing to note, too, is that our SROs are not our employees. They're employees of the sheriff. They get specialized training from the sheriff's department for that in the schools, as well as they received, are also under the direction of the sheriff. But they also are very important to us, as you know, to make sure we have a safe environment for our students to learn and for our employees to work in. This is a 2-year MOU. It does get reviewed every 2 years. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer those for you.
I do have a question, and it's actually for, maybe Dr. Hummer can address it. School starts next week. This MOU is not going to hinder our SROs being in our schools comes the first day of school, is it?
No, sir. Yeah, there
Okay.
is no delay for the SROs to continue to work in our schools. This is just a process, as Mrs. Camry mentioned, that we have to review every 2 years. The public does we need to seek that feedback from the public for any comments. And then if there are any issues, of course, we'll let you know if we have to talk through those. But as of right now, we're not anticipating any. So
Okay.
That's correct.
Perfect, thank you. Any other board member questions? Mr. Lake?
Yeah, so I guess there's no action, right, to take to the full board, but I guess I'm a little curious as to why it's here in the Finance Committee and not in front of the full 7 board. I mean, are we going to mention it? Are we going to bring it up? Are we, there's 3 board members not here. Are we going to highlight it at our next board meeting? What are we going to do here?
Yes, Mr. Lake, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
So we did receive this a couple weeks ago, so we wanted to make sure that we presented it to you all so that you all were able to see it. And then it is going to be mentioned at the board meeting on Tuesday so that you are aware that it is posted on our website. And then if there are any questions from the other board members, that they can, of course, reach out to me and we can answer any of those questions. We felt that this was the best place to present this information because then it will go to the full board on Tuesday.
Question.
Yes, ma'am?
It says there's 10 days for public comment. Will that give enough time to be presented at the board meeting on the 15th for the full 10 days of public comment?
Correct. Yes, that'll give us plenty of time because the public comment, if they want to come on Tuesday to provide any sort of public comment, they can do that, but then they can also send in any comments to any of the board members or myself.
Okay.
Any further questions?
Is this Mr. Chairman, sorry, is this a new thing, or is this just one of the 2-year updates? We have one
It's one of the
currently in
2-year
place.
updates.
Thank you. Any substantial changes to this one versus the last one? or-
No.
Exactly the same.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We'll move on to the 4th item, FY24 transportation adjustments.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, board members. I had the pleasure yesterday with Dr. Hummer of walking across to Jameswood Middle School and talking to transportation employees, which was exciting. We have a group of very excited people, and we're excited to get the year started. In some listening sessions we've conducted jointly with Human Resources, myself, the Finance Department, we've identified some areas of growth for the county in terms of contracts for employees. What we'd like to consider is what we'd like to do is place 8 drivers and 2 aides on a 7-hour contract. We would adjust the hours of the current drivers to create also 1 driver and 1 trainer position, which would help us provide more expertise in those areas. In surveying the bus drivers, we've learned that we want to make sure that we understand what they expect and would like to have in terms of a bonus, either twice a year or monthly. We had the opportunity to collaborate with Calvin to do that, so he has responses for us. We also want to add 2 hours for in-service training meetings and then create a van driver schedule, which would allow us to pick up and deliver students in a kind of new way. The way that we would cover these items would be, from a funding standpoint, is we would freeze 10 of our vacant driver positions. And when I say vacant, they're existing positions that we will not fill. So that's what we'd like to do. I didn't know if you had any questions, but a team of us, of course, is here tonight to answer any that you have.
Are there any questions?
What are the current contract hours that we have?
Yep, Ms.
4.5.
4.5.
And if I may add, please, because I forgot to state it earlier, this is something that could maybe considered a pilot opportunity that we could learn from. And if this was something that worked for our drivers and worked for the division, then we could expand this opportunity further.
And just to clarify, the van drivers aren't required to have the CDL license that, the bus drivers are required to have, correct?
That is correct.
Which makes it a little bit easier, in some circumstances.
Yes, if I may, Mr.
Yes,
Goodman,
please.
Mr. Chair. As I've been getting out and doing my listening tours and having that open door policy, I have spoken with quite a few transportation staff. And a couple of those staff are aides, and Mr. Nance might be able to chime in on this as well. And as educators, we make things work. We get things done. And we have some vans that do require a driver, and we have taken some aides to transport our students because, again, they don't need a CDL license. Well, what was reported to me was that some of these aides were still being paid as an aide and not as a driver, and that was a little frustrating for some of them, and I felt that frustration. So, again, this is based on feedback that we received from them, based on feedback we received from administration, from transportation, as well as feedback from you, because I know a lot of our drivers have reached out to you, and our drivers are very important to us, and we want to make sure that we are compensating them and providing them with incentives to show our appreciation. So I think this will be a way for us to compensate them in a way where they can be aides, and we'll compensate them for the days they're aides, but then when they're drivers, we'll compensate them for when they're drivers as well. Again, because we do have some extenuating circumstances where the vans are required to transport our students in a more efficient manner, such as for students that are McKinney-Vento, students with disabilities. So this is a way for us to be efficient, but we also want to compensate our staff.
Perfect.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'm appreciative to see this, so thank you for the work on this. This is something that I've had people reach out and request. So I'm glad we're trying things like this out because the job that our drivers do is a very difficult job that I would not want to do. So, and they do it with a smile, and they greet our kids, and they get them to and from school each day safely. So I'm appreciative to see some efforts here in this area. I did have a question. The second bullet where it says adjust hours of current driver to create one driver trainer position. Can you explain what that means? Does that mean we're adjusting the current contract hours?
That's the current bus driver who is working now 4.5 hours. We're just making them 7 hours so they can do training the other hours. So it's really just adjusting them from 4.5 up to 7 hours, but they'll be part trainer on a 12-month contract.
Got it. So we're not taking hours away from our normal bus?
No.
That's what I wanted to make sure. Okay.
We're
Thank
adding
you.
the hours to that other driver.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
And I know the survey's out there. Do we have a general ballpark idea of when the survey might be back so we can figure out if they're looking at twice a year or monthly for the?
Mr. Davis just brought that to us this afternoon.
Okay.
So we're not releasing those numbers yet.
No, that's,
We just have to look at those. He just brought them in before this meeting, so we
Per-
do appreciate him doing that.
Yeah.
But we're going to look at those and
Okay.
then talk with him.
No,
and then go-
perfectly
And then we'll
fine.
probably bring back a recommendation if anything changes through
Okay.
whether it's through your Friday memo or whatever that may be.
perfect.
We're not trying to hide it. It's hot
We
off the
just
press.
received it.
No. Well, I appreciate you putting out that survey too. So really do appreciate that. And like Mr. Comstock said, compensating and doing a little bit better for our bus drivers is greatly appreciated. Any other questions in regards to this? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Parent organizations overview, boosters, PTO, athletic associations.
Thank you, Mr. Hester. So we thought maybe this would be a good time for us to talk a little bit about what our boosters and athletic associations and what we expect of them and what they expect of us and what the roles are. What is the school role in them when they work with them, and what is their role with us? So we thought we'd just give you a little bit of an overview today to see, just to give you some insight, because they're gearing up and they're very important to us because they help provide funding for our students in a lot of different ways. And it's not just athletics, but it's the PTOs at the elementary schools, it's our middle schools. So we have a lot of respect for them, and we appreciate the hard work that they do to help support our students. So what is their role as a parent organization? It's really to advance programs and support and improve educational opportunities for our students. And you see some examples here. Of course, you always hear about PTOs. We have booster clubs, whether that's athletic, whether that's choral, or band. And then we have a parent council, and then, of course, the athletic associations, which we're all familiar with. The one thing that you don't see on here is CTSO, and that's because they don't fall under this category. CTSO is the Career and Technical Student Organization, and that's more in the middle school, and that is not fundraising. That is handled through local dollars. I'm sorry, that's not handled through a parent organization. That's handled through the school, through fundraising or local dollars. And that's more under the instructional side, and I think Mr. Angelo, or Dr. Angelo may be planning on giving a little insight into CTSO, maybe at an instructional committee. And if not, I think he is now, because I just said that wrong. Because he looked a little like, what? Okay, so we will.
We will do that when we do this.
If the board would like, maybe I'll just.
What else would you like?
So while parent organizations, they are independent of us. And when I say independent, they have to have their own federal ID number with the IRS. They have to file tax returns annually. They have to have their own separate bank account, and they have to have bylaws that guide them, meaning how many makes up their board, how many people are on their board, what are those positions on their board, and they have to have an operational process. So that's what makes them independent. But as you'll see on the next slide, we do have to work with them. And here's the role of the school administrator. So our administrators have to attend those meetings and not be an officer, but they have to attend because they have to give insight. What is it our school needs? What are the needs of our classrooms? What are the needs of our athletics? Whatever that is, the best people to know that are administrators in the building. So they provide these groups with a list of the needs. So they can say, here's what we need, and let that parent organization choose what they would like to fund. They also have to, our principals have to approve fundraisers. If they're happening in our school, our principals have to know about it and approve those. They also, our principals in charge of protecting the school name, meaning that when we say Jameswood High School Athletic Association, Jameswood High School, the name itself is in that, their title. So therefore, we have to have some input to determine whether or not they're operating effectively and doing what is right, so that we can help protect our school division as well. The principal also has the right to deny funding if they deny having them do a fundraiser, or if they want to purchase something, the principal has the right to say, we will not accept that donation. So that's kind of important, whether that's funding in cash or whether that's funding in equipment. So they always have the right to decline a donation. And then before a fundraiser can happen in the school, we require all of these organizations to have at least 3 officers, and that's just to have insight onto what's happening. Anytime you have 2, it's not quite enough because things can fall through the cracks, so we usually require 3 officers to be on a board before they can fundraise. And of course, none of our administration can serve as an officer on that organization's board, because then it looks like it's more of a school organization, and it is not.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
do these bullet points correspond to the CTSOs as well?
CTSO is a little different, no, because because it's not a separate one, the administrator is always going to be involved in something like CTSO because it's in their school and it is their funds, and they're raising it and separating. So like if FFA is selling fruit, then all that money runs through the school's account. So the principal has access to see those funds. So it's a little different, but he still has to approve all fundraising, whether it's an internal group or an external group.
Good question.
And then lastly here, we do have some resources for our parent organizations that we usually share with them, letting them know how they operate, how they can distribute information out to our families. So you can see here, we also have a whole chapter in the Manual of Accounting that's at the school level that they're asked to always give a new organization, a new president, that kind of defines what the roles are between them and us. So we do have those resources out there for our parent group. And I'll ask if there's any other questions before we go to the next item.
Any other questions? Mr. Lake?
Yeah, we have our list of policies here. In Is that our form of audit on these groups? Are these groups ever audited by anyone?
Not by us, because they are independent, so we couldn't request an audit on them. But they
We
themselves.
could or could not?
We could not.
We could not.
Because it's like us asking for an audit of Boy Scouts. It's no different than anything like that. So we can't request it, but we strongly encourage them to have that. It's really the boards themselves should be making sure that everyone's doing what's right on that board. I mean, that's the purpose of a board for any nonprofit or any organization. Again, if you're moving down the path of saying that if there was ever a suspect that something was not happening correctly, our way of eliminating that or trying to shut it down is no fundraiser. We would not approve any fundraiser to happen until they met something that we're asking for. Like, okay, we can't, no fundraiser for fruit, because until you can show us this, this, and this, we're not feeling comfortable. So we do have some actions to take if needed.
Is the Education Foundation in this category of characters?
In reality, yes. They are a nonprofit. They do operate as their own.
And they are not employees?
And they are non-employees.
Because we've seen, I mean, over time, we've seen cases around the state of, people coming under fraudulent,
Scrutiny.
So, and these groups are out there, the first thing they say, James Wood, Sharando, whatever, the Warrior Club, they're saying the name of us and then a school and asking for funding. And it just seems like, internally, it's a hands-off kind of approach. So, Dr. Hummer, remember when, this is a subject that I guess that we talked about equality, distribution of the funds. A school organization raises funds, and great good for them. The band wants to send the whole band to New York City to do something. Well, good. But then under equality, they're raising funds in the name of the school, but the funds are just for that thing. And then would we ever come under scrutiny for, unequal distribution of funds? Or is it assumed, everybody here, that an individual group, a band booster, is only going to raise funds for the band, and the rest of the high school was whatever it is? So the Athletic Association has 17 sports. If the football booster raises funds, that's just for football and that's okay? Or is it 17 sports that should benefit in some way that a fundraiser was raised for a high school sports program? I mean, this is, I'm not making this up. This has come to the front lately. And, the question was about equal sharing. It was presumed that that's what happened at Sharando with softball, is that, there was funding, whatever, and the softball team wasn't treated fairly and all that stuff. So I'm just trying to cover the bases here of, actually, all I'm trying to do is really understand, because we do get asked these questions, and where the questions come from, it's coming from the people that feel they're not being treated equally. So if I know the rules, I'm good. But on this particular thing, I'm not sure I know what the rules are. So.
Well, I want to get back to this slide. Our principals are involved in those meetings. They should be reporting out where their money's coming from, just like any other nonprofit. The treasurer's report should be coming out. Our principals do have the right to ask for anything from these parent organizations that we so choose to see. So they can't be a closed book, because again, what we do have is we have the ability to not let them fundraise on our property. And that should be like at a football game, that could be in our building in any way, anything of distribution, anything along those lines. Now, if someone else goes outside of that to try to raise funds or try to do the go-around, I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen that yet, but it doesn't mean it won't happen. But still, our principals have the authority to deny accepting cash or property if we deem it not being fair or it doesn't sit right with us for whatever that reason may be.
Okay, so, Dr. Hummer, the question, as you know, came up. Then, does a coordinator of student activities have any jurisdiction over funds that certain booster groups may raise in the school? This was a question that was raised, and so,
When you say, I'm sorry. is
Yeah,
it okay
please,
if I go
Mrs.
ahead?
Camry, hey, please.
When you say, does our CSA have any authority over the funds, do you mean as far as telling them what to spend it on? When you say authority, what?
yeah, exactly.
Well, that's where this list, they're supposed to be given. If anything is outside of that list, say we give you a list and say these are the things we need, and they purchase something that we really don't need, that's maybe over the top, we can decline receiving those items. And again, the coaches work for the school division. So the coaches themselves are paid by the school division. They are employees of the school division. So even if the go-around was to the coach, then that's a different issue because then that's an employee issue. If that helps. I feel like I'm making it more
No,
confusing.
no, Mrs. Camry, I have some stuff to add. I know there's, Mr. Chair, I'll let you.
Mr. Comstock,
to take off real
I
quick.
know you do. You've got to open a
Yeah.
house for your dog.
So just one thing for this real quick, but it sounds to me in this that it's the administrator that should be making that call of whether or not to accept, not necessarily a CSA.
True.
Correct.
But they do work in tandem,
But
yes.
they do work in tandem probably there. But I guess the hard part of this is, making sure that we aren't accepting gifts that gives one team or group or gender team even I don't know, access to different materials that creates an inequality, right? But on the flip side of that, you have certain boosters and groups that are very, very involved and do a whole lot of work and a whole lot of fundraising. So I think it's a really challenging thing to balance. But I don't really have any answers to it, and I've got to leave.
Oh,
He's got to head out.
Oh, okay. I can follow up with you later, Mr. Comstock, because I have a lot to add to this situation, yeah. See you, Mr. Comstock. Have fun.
No, I just had a more, it's sort of a question / comment. Per Mr. Comstock's, we don't want one club's, team or whatever sort of getting additional items, than other teams aren't. And, it is something that we have to navigate. But, one thing I'll say is, times change. Things change, and things that might have been okay 40 years ago, times, laws and things like that come about that we as a board have to adjust to from within the school system, and clubs and, groups have to adjust to. So I just wanted to make that sort of clear that, what might have been okay 40, 50 years ago might not necessarily be that today. And, and then my other question, and Mr. Comstock truly brought it up, but these band and these booster clubs and athletic booster clubs and things like that really do fall under the school itself. With the principal overseeing that, and it's not like the school board overseeing that. Is that what, do you know what I mean?
No.
A lot of constituents have asked me, can I do something? But it truly falls under that individual school. A certain high school, like you said, the principal is working with those groups
Yes,
on an
not the
individual,
school board
and not the
itself.
school board, not the
Yes.
system. It's that individual school and,
Yes.
principal that's working with those.
Yes.
Yeah, the school board establishes the policies that.
Yes.
we need to implement. Correct. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I
Yes.
do have a lot to add. So thank you, Mr. Lake. You definitely added a lot of layers to that, and I'm going to kind of share where we currently are with the situation and hopefully be able to answer your questions. And then there is some more work that we have to do with this particular situation. I also want to thank Mrs. White for bringing this up back in June, so we can really dive into this to make sure that we are doing things correctly to avoid any sort of fraudulent type situations, because at the end of the day, we are responsible for the money that we accept and how that money is being spent. And yes, these are entities that we appreciate. These are entities that work very hard for our students, but we want to make sure that everyone involved in this process understands that we are responsible for how these funds are being dispersed. And for some folks, that's something that needs to be re-explained, because we don't want to come across that we are trying to hold anything close to our chest or that the money is going somewhere where it shouldn't be. It's because we truly want to make sure that this money is being spent, as Mr. Lake said, in an equal manner. So since the last meeting, I have had a conversation with all three of our high school principals and our three CSAs, and they were able to provide a very clear explanation as to where we currently are with our booster organizations. And all three of them said the exact same thing, is that they greatly appreciate our boosters. They greatly appreciate the support. There's just some things that I think it's really coming down to communication, as you were just mentioning, Mr. Lake, in regards to how these funds are being spent, and just making sure that all of these organizations are working together to make sure that we all understand how these funds are being spent. And then I am going to be reaching out to other all of the booster organizations, so to get their viewpoint on some things. And after some initial conversations, it again is really coming down to the communication piece, because as Mrs. Camry stated, they are responsible for the auditing, they are responsible for the fundraising and how their money is being allocated through their board. We are responsible for, when that money is received, that we are allocating it in an appropriate manner. And as Mr. Hester just mentioned, we have, and this is something that I am very appreciative of, and I've noticed here in my first 7 months, is that there's a lot of tradition here in Frederick County, which is something that we thrive on, and it's something that is our foundation. And I think what has happened is there's been many, many, many years, decades actually, of sponsors that have provided funding and donations that have gone to specific sports. And it's just, that's where we are. So we want to make sure that when that money is received, that we are using it in an equitable manner, but that we're also having a conversation of when we do receive these funds, because yes, there is funds that we provide to each of our schools that they can also in tandem purchase those items. So as Mr. Lake mentioned just a second ago, if there are items purchased for other sports, such as baseball, that we are also providing them for the softball team as well. If we don't know about those items being purchased, or if those items are happening and provided to the teams, and we are not looped into that conversation to say, well, we don't have that money right now to purchase that, it puts us in a tough spot. So again, I think based on my interim conversation, I think it's coming down to communication, just hitting the reset button and everybody getting on the same page of where we currently are with this, because we're trying to, at the end of the day, all have the same vision of doing what's best for our students, getting them the right materials that they need. I think there are some materials I'm hearing about as a want, and that would be nice, but we want to make sure that we are spending money first for the need, and then we'll be able to navigate and work through those pieces. So generally speaking, each of our 4 high schools have 4 boosters, because I know that's probably the topic right now of what we're talking about is these booster organizations. And it's athletics, band, choral, and what's called senior parent. And the senior parent is for our seniors that need some additional support for, say, a picnic, or there's other events that they provide to them. So each of them have those 4. And that is pretty standard for a school division to have those basic 4 organizations. And then for some, there are, as you mentioned, Mr. Lake, maybe a football booster or a baseball booster, and that's where things get complicated. And that is where we have to make sure that there is communication with the principal, the CSA, and each of those booster organizations, regardless if they've been here for decades or if they've been here for 6 months. that we are having full conversation and communication to make sure that we're all working together so everybody understands how these funds are being spent and how we're making sure we're providing our students with what they need. So at the last meeting back in June, I'll end with this, I promise. Back in June, we talked about where this particular topic needs to rest. Should it be finance? Should it be another committee? What I'm recommending is I'm going to continue to meet with our boosters. I'm going to continue to collaborate with my team and the principals and the CSAs. And based on where I feel we are going to land, I'm going to either make a recommendation of 1 or 2 meetings. We're either going to continue to take it through finance and budget, or based on how complex and complicated, I'm going to make a recommendation that we do a work session. Yeah, I think this would be something that if it continues to add many layers, as Mr. Lake mentioned, we would bring all 7 of you together through a work session so we can talk this out. But I'm not yet ready to make that decision because I'm still gathering information from each of the boosters, and I want to make sure that I'm informing you every step of the way, and whatever you all would like me to do, of course, I'm going to do that. So Mr. Lake, you asked some really, really good questions, and I think to answer it, I think is just that I think there are some sponsors, no fault of anybody, that they were very specific of where they want certain money to go, and this is beyond the boosters. It's just sponsors that are providing money, and we need to make sure that we clearly explain that we are responsible for how money is being spent, right? We can't have, hypothetically, a dome for our football team, and then our baseball and softball and soccer teams are playing outside. Like, we have to make sure that we are equitable in regards to what that looks like. That's just a hypothetical situation, of course.
I'd like the dome, though.
So, but Mr. Lake, you bring up really, really good questions, and continuing to look into that.
I would like to say thank you, because I know at the last board meeting, we had sort of tasked you with working on that, and it seems like you've made great progress with that and continued those conversations, and we look forward to hearing from you down the road about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I agree. It's a huge undertaking, but I think that at the end of the day, or at the end of this road, that it will be beneficial to our students in a really impactful way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White.
And I will say this, at the end of the day, like you said, all we want's the best for our kids, across the board. So like Mrs. White said, it'll be a beneficial review, and look forward to your guidance on that.
Thank you.
With that said, we'll move on to the Substitute Appreciation Day.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. First, I just want to thank the amazing HR team for brainstorming this and bringing it to fruition. But we are very excited to bring forward Substitute Appreciation Day. I feel like I gotta, for your consideration. It is very exciting. So currently, substitute appreciation is done at the building level, but we'd like to bring that and expand that division-wide. Just hearing from our constituents and wanting to recognize just how critical our subs are, we're going to present this to you for adoption. And shameless plug, you guys have the information here, what we're going to do. One voucher for a free lunch on Sub Appreciation Day, November 17th. And then have our banners at each of our building locations so that when people are coming in, they can recognize, shake hands, give high fives, just really pay attention to our subs that day. So that's the approximate cost. And of course, what we invest in the banners will be reusable year after year. So, but shameless plug for our subs. And if you or someone are interested in subbing, please come talk to HR. This is for the audience at large. It's a great entryway into our division, and we would absolutely love to talk to you about it. So just a big shout out and a thanks to our subs. They do a lot of hard work for us. So any questions?
Ms. Wood?
Chairman, no questions, but again, to appreciate substitutes, I think that the way it works sometimes is they get a message in the morning and they are thrown in to wherever they're going to be, and to be able to be that flexible and adaptable and just go in with a good attitude is a really admirable trait to have, and
Absolutely.
thank those people so much.
I want to say the same thing. It was interesting. One of my daughters today, we were doing meeting her teachers and stuff. And the teacher specifically said, I've seen you somewhere. And then through conversation, she had mentioned she was a long-term sub that had then transitioned into a full-term. So, our substitutes are very, very important. Like Mrs. White said, whether they get the phone call first thing in the morning or they're a long-term sub that then leads into a full-time position, it's greatly needed. So, like you said, those banners are going to be reusable, which will be nice, and we can put them up every year and then provide them a free lunch. So,
That's right.
yeah.
And their presence supports our professional learning, so our staff
Yeah.
can get the skills and the training that they need to just advance our students. So it's an incredibly important job, and
Absolutely.
Very
This is one way
grateful.
we can show our appreciation to them.
Yeah. Well, thank you to you and your HR staff for putting this all together. It's going to be worthwhile.
Absolutely. So we bring that forward to you for consideration. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Hummer.
Perfect.
Thanks.
With that said, how would the board like to moving forward with proclaiming Substitute Appreciation Day?
I would move that the superintendent recommend to forward to the full board the resolution for the VPSA Educational Technology Funds, declaring intent to reimburse itself for the qualifying expenditures and proclaiming November 17th as Substitute Appreciation Day.
I think we already did the first one, so it's just proclaiming November 17th as Substitute Appreciation Day, so I will second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Dr. Hummer, is there anything else that you would like to add before adjournment?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Okay, with that said, I'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Do what? Oh, you are correct.
Move
Do
to
I-
adjourn.
Motion, second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Now we'll adjourn, sorry.
Has anyone ever said no?
Since you brought it up.